Hello, thank you for tuning in to Ending the Arkansas Opidemic, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the opiate epidemic in Arkansas. My name is Jamal Williams. I am the new executive officer to the Arkansas State Drug Director, and I will be your host today for this episode. Joining me is Staci James, the co-founder and executive director of Hope Movement Coalition. On March 19, 2019, Staci lost her 22-year-old son, Hagen Jones, to an accidental fentanyl poisoning. Riddled with grief and feeling alone, she set out to ensure other mothers and families dealing with similar pain would have a support system and access to resources that would help them deal with their grief. Thank you for joining us today, Staci.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about Hagen.
Oh, Hagen. Once you met Hagen Jones, you never forgot him. He was incredibly intelligent. He was incredibly energetic. He was a natural-born leader. He was one of those kids, and you hear it said about so many, that kind of guy that would give you the shirt off his back. He would give you the shirt off his back. He would give you the shoes off of his feet. He was just an incredibly bright light. That substance use disorder burned out for us. Hagen was abused in a daycare setting when he was 2 years old. In the state of Arkansas, the timeout policy is 1 minute per year of age. And for 6 months, we didn't realize it was going on, but they were putting Hagen in refrigerator boxes for 30 minutes to an hour at this vital time in his sweet little developing brain, where he needed to be reassured, he needed to be nurtured, he needed to be loved. And as he would cry for me, he was told, "Your mama don't want you, your mama don't need, she doesn't want to hear about this." It was a very traumatic, emotional abuse, a mental abuse that did in some ways kind of bleed over into physical abuse. But that's what started Hagen's path. Throughout his elementary journey, he was diagnosed ADHD and was said to have had all these behavioral problems, when in all reality, they weren't addressing his trauma. And so that evolved into self-medicating. After he got tired of all of the pharmaceuticals, all the different mood stabilizers, antidepressants, it did too much to his body. One would make him very lethargic. He couldn't stay awake. Another might give him a horrible headache. One they gave him when he was 13 caused him to put on about 25 pounds in 2 months. That's not what a 13-year-old boy needs to deal with. We did counseling for many, many, many years, and he just got to that point when he kind of hit puberty where he was like, "What you want me to do isn't working. I'm going to do it my way." And he started self-medicating. At first, it was with marijuana. And I know a lot of young people do that. They may not go out and drink, but it's okay just to smoke a little joint. Well, that actually set Hagen on a trajectory of not learning how to cope with his trauma. And instead of coping, he would just deaden it. And it was a battle. He did ultimately go into the U.S. Navy. He was a submariner. Very few people are wired to be able to stay under water for as long as those guys are, but he did. He was a leader in his squadron. He loved the Navy. It was his lifelong dream. And as happens, you've heard drink like a sailor, cuss like a sailor. Those sailors have that reputation for a reason. They're just young people cutting loose. And unfortunately, they did recreational cocaine, and Hagen was sent home. And that was, I believe, what ultimately took him from us. He couldn't bounce back for that. He couldn't forgive himself for being reckless, even though he was 21. Even though this is something that most young people are doing, for him, it ruined his life, and he knew it. But he decided to rally. We had a tough year, and on the Thursday before he died, he called me and he said, "Okay, Mom, I'm ready. I'm ready. I want to get back into counseling. I want to take care of my mental health." He knew he was going to be a dad. And unfortunately, that last weekend was supposed to be the last hurrah. And fentanyl found its way into a line of cocaine. Now, let me just say, I'm not a proponent for recreational cocaine. I'm just saying cocaine is not what killed him. He never should have been doing that line of coke. But the movies and music, they glorify this thing. So, and these young men in particular, the bravado, we're 10 feet tall and bulletproof. That's never going to happen to us. And it was quite literally a line of coke. He had 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his system. There was no coming back from that. So amazing bright light, that fought an incredibly tough battle. I'm proud of him. I'm proud of how much he fought. One thing that he never lost through his struggle was his ginormous heart. Even when he was at his lowest of lows, he was tending to others. He was helping others. Since he left me, I've had so many people come up and say, man, your son, he didn't see color. He didn't see background. He loved, and he loved big. If you were his friend, you were his brother, you were his sister. And that's the legacy that he left behind.
Thank you. And that's a big deal to share that with us. I mean, that reaches a lot of people, and we truly, truly appreciate testimonies like that. So tell us about your grief. How did you deal with your grief at first?
I ran from it. My youngest son had just turned 16. And without knowing, I knew that was setting him up for becoming a statistic. If his grief and his pain and his trauma was not adequately addressed. And I had a grandbaby on the way. We actually did the first ultrasound the day before Hagen's memorial service. So I had those that I loved and cared about to focus on. And that's what I did. Those first few weeks was just focusing on Weston, my youngest, this grand biscuit that's coming my way, and the love that Hagen left behind, Tyler. Those kids were hurting. And yes, I'd lost my son, but you almost go into autopilot. You go through the motions, and what I knew was that my kids needed me. And I could do that, and I could do that well. What I couldn't do well, what I had not been taught to do, was accept that I had lost my firstborn child. So the first few, I would say month and a half, I focused on those kids. They had to be okay. They had to be okay.
Gotcha. So thank you for that response. How did you connect with other mothers with the Hope Movement Coalition, such as Miss Trey and Taylor's mom?
Well, after the services, after I knew that the kids were doing okay, that's when I had to settle into my grief. And there's nothing more isolating or lonely than to have lost a child. I say this a lot, and I'll continue to say it just to paint the picture for you. There's over 8 billion people on this planet. And I could have been surrounded by every single one of them, and I still would have been the most lonely I've ever been, because the one person that could make it better was no longer on the planet. And I had to reckon with that. I didn't want to put pressure on the kiddos, and so I really almost started stalking mothers. And I say that lightheartedly, but there was this desperation for connection. I needed somebody that understood what it was like to lose a child. And it had to be a mother's perspective. So, and I honestly don't remember who I met first. I don't remember if it was Trey's mom, Tracy, or if it was Taylor's mom, Deborah. But I met Deborah actually at Taylor's visitation. I had seen her obituary, and I grabbed the memorial pamphlet from Hagen's, and I went to Taylor's memorial service, and her visitation, and I saw Deborah standing up there all by herself, and I thought, oh no. So I walked up and introduced myself. I gave her a big hug. I told her, you are not alone, and handed that pamphlet to her with my phone number on it, and she called. And that was a connection that I needed, even though I was already 3-4 months in to my loss. She was brand new. She needed somebody to be for her what I didn't have. And then Tracy, she actually started a national initiative called Can You See Me Now? And it was banners. Each banner has 150 photos on it. And every photo is a person that has lost their life to illicit drug deaths. And I finally submitted Hagen's photo, and Tracy and I connected a little bit just through, Facebook Messenger. And one thing that social media is good for is they have a lot of really awesome support groups for mothers that are in the same situation I am. And I just put a post out there. Hey, are there any Arkansas moms here? And Tracy responded, I'm in Arkansas. And I was like, what do you mean you're in Arkansas? She was actually in West Memphis. And so we made plans for the three of us to get together, and we've not turned back.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Those partnerships, you definitely see those go and make the stage, set the stage for those testimonies, but also that support that's much needed. Mm-hmm. So when did you decide to start the Hope Movement Coalition, and what motivated this decision?
Kirk Lane. Tracy and Deborah and I, we had a lot of questions. You are never more informed about fentanyl or the opioid crisis until you lose someone. And I could have a PhD in it at this point. And we just kind of started seeing so many different things across the state and across the nation. We had major questions. And I sent Kirk Lane an email. And I said, hey, we've got these Can You See Me Now banners. You need to see these. And I honestly did not expect a response. And by the end of the day, he said, let's do this. And so the three of us went in, and he cleared his entire afternoon for us. And we sat down in front of him, and we just started having the conversation. And by the end of that meeting, he said, what you guys have here, we've got to get it out there. How do you feel about starting a nonprofit? And we all kind of looked at each other. It was never our intent. We just wanted our questions answered. And he said that, and we were like, okay. And he said, come up with a name. And I don't remember if it was Tracy or Deborah, but they said, we already have a name, because I had actually started blogging in the late night, that the pain would be so intense. I thought I was journaling, and eventually that found a platform through Facebook, and I called it Hope Movement. And so when he, said, come up with the name, one of those girls said, we've got it. It's Hope Movement Coalition. And that was in October of 2019.
Nice. So tell us a little bit about the purpose and the mission of the Hope Movement Coalition.
Oh, wow. There's so much. There's so many layers. And in that regard, it kind of mirrors this epidemic that we're up against. There's so much that needs to be done, right? When we first started out, of course, we focused on the Can You See Me Now banners, but we were also going to all of these recovery events. We wanted to support those that were in the battle. We wanted to stand behind them and cheer them on, kind of like a team mom, because our kids weren't here to celebrate, but we still needed that celebration. And so we started doing that. Deborah started TLC from TNT, which was and is a program where we provide individuals that are in recovery during the holidays that maybe can't go home, or because a bridge has been burned, don't have a home to go home to. Taylor taught her the importance of loving and acknowledging and that support and encouragement. So we started shoving Christmas bags full of stuff to hand to those individuals. We graduated to, we have what we call our Hope Tree. And we will find a facility that has a lot of people in there that have children. Mm-hmm. And we adopt those children out. We purchase the Christmas presents, but then we allow those parents to give their children the Christmas presents from them as a point of restoration, a point of reassurance, Can You See Me Now has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. We are now up to, we've completed Banner 31. And we're working on Banner 32. They've been at the White House. They've been at the border wall. They've been on so many state capitol front steps. It's just this very powerful indication of what this disease truly, truly looks like. And in the middle of that, as I started getting to know more parents, I heard what was needed. For instance, I'll never forget this. There was a family that was in need of finances to help offset the cost of their loved one's funeral. That loved one was in a morgue and had to remain in that morgue until the money was provided to pay for the the funeral. And to me, that wasn't okay. If a mother has suffered the loss of her child, as hard as planning a memorial service is, no mother should have to visualize her child being in a morgue for months on end. So we started helping offset the cost of those funerals. We started stepping in and contacting the funeral homes when we knew there was a need, and we would donate an amount. And then we would check back in a couple of days. Where are they on getting this paid off? And it's an amazing thing to watch, because those families that we were able to help, when the cloud kind of parted, they would then give back. They would hold fundraisers. And then we were able to use that family's money to help another family and another family and another family. Overall, it's all about support and raising awareness. And we are advocates at heart. We want the state and the nation to know that this didn't come after Hagen's family because he was Hagen. It didn't go after Taylor because she was Taylor. It does not see race, religion. It does not see how much money you have in the bank. It doesn't see it. It doesn't care. And, so many parents will think, well, I've got a good kid. You do have a good kid, but you still have a kid. And life is hard. And sometimes kids make foolish mistakes. When we're talking about opioids, especially now with the prevalence of the fentanyl, that bad decision leads to a death certificate. And so we get in front of that. Nothing we say or do is going to bring our babies back, but we can help save the next generation, right?
Yes, ma'am. Well, that kind of brings us right into that next question. What are some other ways, because you shared one example, what are some other ways that your organization has supported families over the years?
I think everything that I just said, I'm so passionate about it, and it's very difficult to explain Hope Movement because we do so much. We had a family who had taken in 3 children because their mother was going to check herself into a faith-based recovery facility. Well, that's a 6 to 9 month time frame, and this family already had 3 children of their own. But out of the goodness of their hearts, they're taking in 3 more. Finances got tight. The grocery bill went up. And so we were able to provide them a Walmart gift card to help offset the cost of those groceries, just so that they weren't taking on a burden and they were able to be a blessing. I've lost track, really and truly. If there was a need, man, we met it. Car payments. We've made car payments. We've paid electric bills. We've done whatever we could do to just remove a little bit of the burden, just a little bit of the stress.
And that's great. I mean, we know that's impactful, especially in that time of grief, but also that's the support that, opens the doors to next steps and how you can continue the conversation in that relationship. So what are some steps your organization has taken to affect real change in the fight against opiate addiction, substance abuse disorder, and fentanyl poisoning? What are some of those ways that you guys have deep dived in to really be effective in, and at least offer some of that impactful resources that we know exist?
Well, one thing that, we've been able to do, and I'm so just excited and proud, we did receive funding from Arkansas Opioid Recovery Partnership.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's very exciting. And with that funding, we've been able to create a platform that we call You Are Not Alone. And that meets those needs that I was just telling you about. So many times a family, especially if they have a loved one that's struggling with substance use disorder, they spend their life savings, their retirement, they mortgage their home multiple times just to keep their loved one alive. And when that loved one passes, there's nothing left. Most companies only offer a 3-day bereavement. Most families don't even have a body back from the crime lab in 3 days. So because they don't have the retirement or the savings to fall back on, they are not mentally, emotionally, and many, many times physically able to go back to work in 3 days. we don't want them to have to worry. So we're going to be able to step in and kind of act as a PTO for them, a paid time off for them. We're going to continue to pay for those funerals as they come. We're very tickled to be able to offer our grandparents that have found themselves saying goodbye to their son or their daughter, but who now are faced with raising that son or daughter. Again, they're not equipped many times to do daycare, diapers, formula. And because they've exhausted a savings account, there's no money there. But for social services, it looks like they make too much money. Well, we're going to come behind and be able to say, okay, here's what we know. We're here to help you so we can help offset the daycare. And this isn't a permanent thing. This is just something to give those families a time to breathe, a time to settle in. It took me 2 months before I could go back to work. And it wasn't because I didn't want to. It was because I couldn't think straight. I couldn't be responsible the way that I needed to be to adequately do my job. Oh, I desperately wanted to go back for financial reasons and just because I felt like if I could go back to work, maybe this would be easier. But we have had Arkansas parents that have gone back to work far too soon and they end up losing their jobs. So we want to get in front of that. With this funding, we've created a biannual 8-week grief course. And actually, our first one starts tomorrow night. I'm super excited about that. Because that community, that getting together and talking through these things. One thing that families that have lost someone to the opioidemic or even to methamphetamine, cocaine, whatever that looks like, any illicit drug, there's this stigma that we're faced with, right? And so creating this grief support group, creating our monthly meetings, those families are able to bypass that and be welcomed by moms like me that totally get it. And I'm not afraid of stigma. We're doing a cause-specific grief retreat. This will be an annual thing where we just get the moms out of the city. So many times, I had to move from Little Rock because it was too hard driving by those same corners because on that corner was Hagen or at that high school was that ball game. And that really weighed me down. So this just gives us all an opportunity to be together. We are, there's so much. I told you.
Share it all. That's what we're here to do.
We are partnering with Partnership to End Addiction, and we've created a Connect platform, which basically you can text HOPE to 844-844-2362, and then you are automatically in with us. They do a small assessment that just lets us know, are you contacting us for grief support? Are you contacting us for financial support? What does this look like? Who in your family did you lose? And then we're going to be able to call them and create a relationship. We have hired 2 case managers that I have put through some strenuous training so that they can go into the homes of these families or do a Zoom meeting, whatever that looks like. And the reason I did this training with them was because I wanted them to understand the disease of substance use disorder. Because you can be the nicest person on the planet and you may never say it out loud, but if you see somebody that's obviously struggling, there's this internal stigma and you think, ooh, that's a junkie, or ooh, they're tweaking. Our case managers can't have that whenever they're going into these homes to talk to these families. So we put them through this training, and it was provided by the Christopher Wolf Crusade, who partnered with the Trauma Institute or Trauma Resource Institute out of California. So they've gotten CRIM training. They will have the trauma training. They will have the opioid training so that when they walk into these homes, they are as knowledgeable as they can be without actually having lost someone. And we've worked out a referral program. Our ultimate goal is to get these families into grief and PTSD counseling. They're 2 totally separate creatures. Grief in and of itself is a monster. But when you compound that with PTSD, and many times this is complex PTSD for those families that maybe have given CPR to their loved one and not been able to revive them, or walked in and seen them slumped over in blue. These are images that haunt, regardless of, if you're a mom or a dad or a brother or a sister, that all has to be addressed. So we've created a referral system with counselors across the state of Arkansas that we know are PTSD certified and grief certified. And so our goal is just to walk with these families, and we want to see them get to that point. It's not an easy walk. It will never be easy, and nothing that we provide, and hear me say this, no amount of resources is going to make it an easy walk. But what those resources will do, it'll make it more bearable. It will get those families to that point so much sooner than many of us. I was 2 years in before I realized I had PTSD. And that's what we're faced with. So what we've done is we've taken what we've learned collectively as families and said, what do we wish we would have had? And we've gotten in front of it, and we've provided that through this program.
That's great. I mean, you look at it as that proactive versus reactive approach and kind of getting out ahead of it. So that's awesome that you guys are even creating a lane for that kind of conversation to happen. So how can supporters, friends, and families of other organizations get involved with you all?
Oh, gosh, contact me. I mean, the thing about this is Kirk likes to say, we created this epidemic. And in many, many ways, society did create this epidemic. The way we stop this is that community steps up and we work together, and we need those resources. The biggest thing you can do for us, because we are so new, we launch on June the 15th, because we are so new, is tell people about us. If you know a family that's lost someone, whether it's been in the last 2 weeks or the last 10 years, some of the mothers that I've connected with literally were 5 years into their grief and had not been able to openly talk about their loved one or the way that they died. That's not okay. So that's what's invaluable. Talk about us to others. Say, hey, have you heard about Hope Movement Coalition? But honestly, the most important and vital thing that anybody can do, whether it's for me or for what the drug director's doing or what our ORP is doing, they have to start having those conversations. They have to start talking at work. They have to start talking at church. They have to start talking at their kids' baseball practices. We're losing teenagers now. These children don't have an opportunity to struggle with substance use disorder. They're being dumb kids. They're trying to cut loose. And fentanyl is making sure that they don't get their driver's license. The only way to stop that assault is if we start having the conversations. That's on every resident of the state of Arkansas, because every resident is at risk. If an 80-year-old woman can be taken from her family because of an opioid overdose simply because she forgot that she took her medicine 2 hours previous, that's no different. It's no different. That's the number one thing. What you can do for me is start talking about it. Reach out to me. If you know a family in need, send them my way.
We would do that. And I'm glad we had the opportunity to even have your testimony here today to spread the word, but also spread awareness. We want to make sure that people are aware of the resources, but also the lanes that they can utilize to really have a conversation that they don't regularly get to have.
Right.
So moving along with those questions, what advice would you give to a family that is grieving the loss of a loved one to substance abuse disorder or fentanyl poisoning?
The first thing I would say to them is that their loved one's cause of death does not define their loved one, and it does not define them. The second thing I would say is you are most definitely not alone. Since 2017, Arkansas has lost nearly 3,000. That's 3,000 families. And see, those are low numbers because until recently, 35 to 40% of the coroners weren't reporting those overdose deaths. And what's not taken into consideration are the number of families who have a loved one that are in recovery outside of the state of Arkansas. So in all reality, we don't know how many there are, but I can promise you, you're not alone. You are not alone. I would also tell them, as bad as it hurts, you can shift from the grief carrying you to you carrying your grief, because there's a very big difference between living and surviving. I would like to say to any families that have a young person 18 and below, in their house, in their family, in their youth group, on, a team, coaches. This goes for all of them. We now have fentanyl in the vape pens. Fentanyl is in 6 out of every single pills purchased on the street. It's found in the marijuana. There is no safe way for them to experiment. These kids are just being kids. They're making the same mistakes you and I made, right? But Boone's Farm, back in the 90s, I didn't have to worry about opening that bottle and it killing me. They're not given the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. Trauma is that's the start of substance use disorder, in my opinion, in my eyes. Whether it's physical, mental, sexual, it's always trauma. And there's nothing more traumatic than losing a loved one to this. When people understand the cause and effect, I think that hearts would be softened if they knew, oh my God, your son was literally put in a refrigerator box for 30, 45 minutes at 2 years old. Maybe they would view him differently. Stigma has them viewing him one way. For those beautiful individuals that have endured sexual or physical abuse, if you knew that about them and you knew maybe that's why that they were self-medicating, would you have a different opinion of them? We're all hurting. We've all endured trauma. And those families deserve the same respect, the same comfort, the same care as the families that have lost a loved one to cancer.
Agreed. So last question, but certainly not least, what preventative measures would you advise a family to take to potentially save their loved one's life?
Narcan. Get some Narcan in your house. I would tell you to keep it in your car, but you can't keep it because of the heat and the cold, but it's vital. That Narcan, whether it's for their families or at Walmart even, this is so widespread, you most definitely will save a life with the Narcan. You can get the Narcansaw app, and I'm not trying to plug anybody, but I'm just saying there are ways to get this and have it on your person. You could save a life, even if it's of a stranger, but you just spared a mom from ever having to call me because she's lost a loved one. I want to take care of the families we have. I don't want to add to them. Because if I add to them, that means I've lost someone. The conversations have to take place. Moms, dads, get in their phones, get in their backpacks. I tell my kids, until you're 18 and paying your own mortgage, this is my house, that's my backpack. And that's how I knew what Hagen was into. It was never a secret. It was a battle we fought together. Not because I didn't trust him because he was untrustworthy. I didn't trust him because he was 14, 15, 16-year-old kid, right? You have to get in front of that. You ask those questions. I would say to pastors, start talking to your congregation. I think you'll be blown away at how many people sitting in the pews at your church services have been affected. This is not a political issue. Death is not political. We all have to agree to disagree and move forward in a way that is going to help heal our communities and get this garbage off the street.
Thank you. Well, that's a lot of great information. We truly appreciate you sharing that with us today, Ms. Staci. And also, we want to just acknowledge the testimony with Mr. Hagen. That's going to resonate with a lot of people, and we are appreciative of you even sharing that experience, but also the resources and the solutions that you were able to identify in your particular case. So we thank you, and thank you again. Thank you again for tuning in to today's podcast. For more information about the Hope Movement Coalition, visit hopemovementcoalition.com. You can also find free resources in the Narcansaw app, which is available for download in the Apple and Google Play Store.